Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Kirsten Winkler of kirstenwinkler.com. This is Questions, and today I am happy to have Paul Sulzberger, and he is an expert, I would say, with a long career in translation and interpretation. So Paul, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Kirsten.
Let's talk about your career at the beginning, because you are down there in New Zealand, and you did your PhD actually in something very interesting about second language acquisition, I believe. And tell us a little bit more how you actually got interested in that field, as New Zealand per se is maybe a rather monolingual country, and so how did you get into this field of foreign languages?
Well, of course, it all happened, as most things happen in people's lives, by accident and by chance. When I was 15 at school, I was studying French. France was very, very far away, on the other side of the world. Going to France in the middle of the 1960s didn't seem to me, as a 15-year-old, much of a possibility in the immediate near future. My sense of geography wasn't that very great, and it took me a long time to realize that there was a French-speaking community in New Caledonia, which wasn't very far away, but I didn't know about that.
And probably you didn't learn about that in school.
Maybe not, I can't remember. But anyway, of course I have a German surname, and I was very interested about that. I remember going into the school library, and there was one very slim German grammar, and I would go and look at it and sort of hope that one day that I would be able to learn this language. It looked so exciting, and it seemed to be something to do with me and personal to do with me. So when I got to about age 16, I discovered that on the far side of the small town where I lived, that the girls' high school had a German course for the last year of the school. And I went to my headmaster and said, "Please, sir, could I get on my bicycle and cycle over to the girls' high school to study German every week next year?" And he said, maybe. Come back and I'll tell you in a week's time. So in a week's time I came back, and he said, "No, I'm sorry, you can't go." I was very, very disappointed. I had tears in my eyes. I rushed out of the headmaster's room, and standing in the quadrangle of the school was my French master, who I knew spoke Russian. And I had no interest in Russian at all, but sort of in spite somehow, I rushed up to him, still tears in my eyes, and said, "Please, sir, will you teach me Russian?" Of course, he was so delighted to have a student enthusiastic and wanting to learn Russian, so we started learning Russian at lunch times and at play times and after school. And so I started learning. I had one other friend with me, so the two of us studied Russian at school. At times we were able to fit it in. And so at university I started learning Russian. And of course in New Zealand in those days, when you started learning Russian at university, if you started from scratch. But see, Paul arrived, he already knew a lot. And so I was always, for the first time in my life, top of the class.
Yeah.
And my dear old Russian professor thought I must have been very clever. Of course he was not right, but however. So a year passed, and an opportunity came for to study at Moscow University. Well, of course, lucky for me that my professor was on the selection committee. So he thought, it must be Paul that goes. So I was the first.
Oh, of course. So a lot of things fell in place without you like actively taking decisions always about that. But yeah, that's a very interesting story. But that's just like how life comes in.
That's right. So there I was in Moscow as a student, and So, and I still haven't achieved my desire to become a fluent speaker of German. So, but anyway, that's what happens in life.
Yeah, that's great. And so then, what I understand is, which is quite outstanding, I think, in at the beginning of the 70s, that you could study Russian in Wellington, and then also part of your studies in Moscow, which is
Yes,
which is
right.
great. And so was
My
what?
life developed after Moscow. After Moscow, I started teaching Russian here for a while. Then I worked for the government as a translator.
Mm-hmm.
And when working for the government as a translator, I discovered that translators in the 1980s were paid like at the same level as clerical assistants.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I became, all of a sudden, having just arrived back a few years ago from Russia, of course, I became a very radicalized union representative, and to see what I could do to improve the situation for translators, and at least get them to the same rating as journalists. We thought that would be an appropriate equivalent. So after waving my arms in the air and going on strike, having long discussions, it was no avail.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said to some of my friends, fellow translators working for the government, at a time, I said, let's go and set up our own company.
Right.
Well, at that time in New Zealand, there were almost no private translation companies. It was before the days of the internet. We used typewriters, and a normal translation would be a scientific document that would take several weeks to translate. You would do it on a typewriter. It would be sent to the typing pool. It would be typed up. It would come back. It would be corrected. It was a very long, tedious process. So, but at that time, Britain had just entered into the common market.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Britain was New Zealand's major buyer of our cheese and butter and sheep and our meat and wool. And suddenly we were losing our market. So it occurred to New Zealand, instead of selling everything to Britain, we had to find new markets.
Yeah.
Well, that was the beginning of an explosion in this country of the need to communicate with countries other than English-speaking ones.
I hope an explosion in salaries as well.
That took some time to come, but however, the need grew. So before we were translating from foreign languages, scientific articles into English. All of a sudden now, we had to be able to translate into Arabic, into Russian, and into French. And this was an entirely new requirement for the country. So we duly left the government, a small group of us, and we became very famous in this little country because it was just at a time when our government was going through a process of privatizing many parts of government service, and we were famous because we privatized ourselves. We just walked out and set up our own company.
Right.
Well, of course, it grew and grew, and we have now 50 staff, and we have French speakers, native speakers, German native speakers, Spanish, all from around the world, where our major markets are, export markets. And at a certain point we discovered in the early 90s what a modem was. We didn't know yet what the internet was, but we had discovered modem. And so we very quickly discovered we could find customers in Europe. And we apply translations, mainly into English, on an overnight basis. So while the customers in Switzerland or Germany or London would send their translations via fax to New Zealand and go home for the day, we would get up in the morning translate and send back ready for them 9 o'clock in the morning.
So would you say from the typewriter to the modem age, it was more the reason that time was sensitive and very interesting, as you said, now it's my morning but your evening, so of course it's very handy for a company when your translation is done overnight. Or does this, maybe not yet internet age, but was there already a transition, sort of the computer being a facilitator for translators, or was it still more or less the same from the old typewriter system to a computerized system back then?
Well, we had made the transition from typewriters to DOS-based word processing. In fact, we started using Wang word processing. And the earliest methods for transferring documents to our clients in Europe was we would take our Wang word processing documents, convert them to simple ASCII text, simple text files, and transmit those to our clients. And then they would have the responsibility for formatting the documents. All we supply was simple text documents. So it took a long time, it took quite a while before it became possible to transmit. This was already, we hadn't even implemented Windows 3.1 at this stage. We were still, it was before Windows 3.1. I remember when we finally introduced Windows 3.1 into our company, of course all the translators complained, they were very unhappy, it was all too complicated. We had all this nice Wang word processing, you can learn the whole thing in about 2 minutes, and there were no complications, you couldn't do anything very special. But,
yeah, I can imagine. It's always the complaint.
Everybody hated me. Everybody hated me because they had just made the transition from typewriters to Wang word processing, and now Paul wanted to change to Windows, this newfangled Windows that nobody liked very much.
And let me ask, why did you see the potential in it? Was there something for you that language acquisition works similar like a computer program? So how could you evaluate or see the potential better than your colleagues or employees?
Well, we saw the potential for exporting English into Europe basically through the Russian connection. Now it happened that there was a young Soviet journalist came to New Zealand and was here for some time. We talked to him and we used to say to him, listen, Gennady, the English you guys produce is really terrible. It really is awful. Nobody will take any notice of the English because it's just too bad. And we used to talk, well, why don't you get us to translate it? And we will translate it. We know, lots of us know Russian here. And anyway, so we talked about this idea for a year. Then we discovered what a modem was. And then we discovered, we actually put a proposal to Novosti, the Russian Soviet press agency. Well, I remember we didn't hear from them for months, I don't know, maybe 6 months. And one night I was at the office, late at night it was, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning. Paul was working at very late. I could hear the fax machine starting to go in the middle of the night. That's strange, it never went in the middle of the night, went down. And streams of paper were coming out from Novosti Press with a big contract. They were going to put $15,000 US in our bank account to start the process. We were so excited, $50,000.
Definitely a nice big project, yeah.
Early 1990s was very exciting. So just before, a few days before the money was due to arrive in our bank account, da-da, there was a coup against Gorbachev. Everybody in Novosti Press, as I understand, was sacked, and the whole thing collapsed. And we thought, well, here we had a great idea. We had a modem, a great idea, and no customer.
Yeah, that's sad.
So we went looking for a new customer, and we found one immediately in London. He was a small advertising agency, and he had some German clients, and he wanted the German advertising translated really quickly. And so he was our first customer in Europe, and he would send us faxes at the end of his day. When we arrived in the morning at our office, the floor was covered with fax paper. You know how the long old
with still the infinite,
there was paper everywhere. So it kept our company very busy all the rest of the day to get that work out by the end of the day. And then, of course, still no email, but we had a modem, and it was like always difficult to make proper connection. And anyway, but we always managed. We never missed a day. So.
Is it still the basis? What is compelling about translation in New Zealand is that you can do work overnight?
Yes, and of course we have a little country, and quite a lot of young Europeans like to come here and work here. So they find it an attractive place to visit or to come and work. So we don't have a shortage of young German translators with their degrees. We have a nice relationship with some German universities. They send us some of their students for practical work for a year, or to come over here to write their thesis or translation or whatever, and work in our office. And so it's a nice arrangement as well to have some young ones.
Definitely. There are worse places to do a thesis than New Zealand. Or you are based in Wellington?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell me, what is the big difference between a translator and an interpreter? I mean, not what they do, but in the process of the language, and how they work differently, basically.
Well, our company doesn't do a lot of interpreting, but the interpreting we do is primarily for local immigrant communities. For example, we have refugees. We have a large Somali community, for example. And of course, earlier on, we had a large immigration from Russia, and so and as those immigrants began to age and had medical problems, there was a large amount of medical interpreting required. So the interpreting has been very much the greater part of it has been for immigrant communities rather than for business.
Okay. And how does it work when you, for example, in the EU, when you are at court, for example, and often, of course, when you have different parties coming together, you need these like instant translators, and they are also very well paid because they can only work in, I think, chunks of 20 minutes. Then you have to change the person. Do you also do this part of translation? And maybe if not from a theoretical point of view, how does it work to translate almost simultaneously or instantaneously into the other language?
In this little country, this country of 4 million people doesn't have enough, it's too small to support that high-level professional interpreting. We have very good translators, of course, but interpreting. So the greater majority of professional interpreters who might work as simultaneous interpreters at an international conference, which we do have here, but in which we always import those professional interpreters from our neighbour just across the ditch, Australia.
Yeah.
So that is a big enough population to support professionals, and so we almost always import them from Australia. So we have Like, for example, in the 1980s, we had a number of Antarctic Treaty Conferences here in New Zealand. And so virtually all the translators who worked with the documents were all local New Zealand translators, or they were native speakers, French, Spanish, Russian, but living resident in New Zealand. But all the interpreters who worked simultaneously, they were all from Australia.
Mm-hmm. I see.
So we're just not quite big enough to support our own.
So then, in your company, you had the modem, it facilitated things, you were in the business, you did the translations overnight, customers were very happy with it, I suppose, and so then comes the internet, and how did the internet impact the translation business?
Well, of course, we adapted to the internet very quickly because we already had several years of experience of transmitting digital files into Europe, and so I remember there was a little bit of skepticism about the internet. Oh, it will never last. You know, it was like, is it just a fad? Mm-hmm. But of course, we quickly adapted to it very quickly and discovered what email was and realized how important it was going to be for us very quickly. One of the things that was very important for us with the email and internet, of course, was that we were able to access more translators than we would have been able to try to. You know, this is a small country. So although we had quite a lot of translators, but the internet meant we could access native speakers, professional translators in other countries that we couldn't do before. I remember years ago, I mean, when I was in the 1980s working for the government, you know, to get a translation done was a very long and complicated, a very long and tedious process. And if it was for a language that we didn't have resources for, the translation would be put into an envelope and posted to the translator in Hungary, and that would take so many weeks to get to him, and he would do the translation, and it would take so many weeks to come back. So, you know, like, there's no question of doing anything overnight. It would take sometimes months to do a relatively simple translation. Yes, so of course the internet changed things. I remember just in April there was a conference about translation in Pisa, and here was Paul sitting here in his own home in this very room in Wellington in New Zealand, sitting in my chair upside down to Europe, and I had the conference live streaming by video into my living room. So I was able to take part. I could listen to the presentations. I could see sometimes the camera would point at the audience, and I could see somebody typing on his laptop, and then suddenly my Twitter would pop up, and I would see exactly what that person I could see in the audience had just typed, and I would type back, "Are you the guy in the green shirt?" "Yes, I am." I could see him. Anyway, so I was tweeting about the conference as well, and then it was a conference over several days, and then somebody tweeted me and said, "Oh, hi Paul, I'll be back at 4:30. Do you want to go out for a drink?"
Yeah.
This guy thought I was actually
there, yeah.
But I was like at the Antipodes almost, but virtually taking.
Yeah, a virtual drink then.
And here's you and me. Here are you and I on opposite sides of the world, and we could just as well be in the same room. So
yeah, you could realize your original dream of visiting France, though. Now. Yeah. And so this conference, and I think you have your very own thoughts of it. How do you see the future of translation then influenced by the internet, and how do you think things are going to develop? And let's talk about your particular plans, of course, and what you are about to set up.
Yes. Well, one of the things very obviously is the process.
Yes.
Is well underway. The process is well underway of things simply becoming faster and more immediate. Customers, the translation business is rapidly growing. Mm-hmm. Globalization is causing the industry to grow. The need for translation is growing faster than human translators can supply. And so the machine translation is going to affect our lives very dramatically. It's already, somebody I read recently calculated that in fact machines are already outputting on a daily basis more than human translators are per day. So this is going to affect translators, but the market is growing. The amount of material that needs to be translated is growing. Translators, I think, will become increasingly specialized in doing stuff that machines won't be able to, still can't do probably for a long time. So translators will become more specialized. They will have, they will adapt as we always have. We adapted to computers, we adapted to modems, to the internet. We will adapt to machine translation. That will continue to evolve, and humans will find better things to do in languages than just doing the simple stuff. Customers need to communicate with their clients. Businesses need to communicate with their customers quickly. They don't want to wait, like in the 1980s, for 2 months to have their Chinese text translated, brochure translated into Chinese and typeset in a foreign country, and waiting. Now they want it tomorrow. Well, they used to want it tomorrow. Now they want it today. So live, real-time translations are already happening. Bigger, more complex jobs, of course, take longer, but the pressure is on for faster delivery, higher quality. So the internet can help solve, has opened up opportunities for translators. That is, translators and translation companies will be under pressure to supply a more highly refined or specialized product. Therefore, they need a bigger market. In the local market, the translation industry, of course, is a very international industry, but in fact, because it's part of the globalization, but in fact, the translation industry itself is extremely local. By far the majority, overwhelming majority of translations are done by translation companies for local clients, not international. But the internet opens up the opportunity for a translation company to have clients all over the world, and for customers to seek translation companies who meet their requirements from many different countries, not just locally. So I am looking at a business proposal which utilizes the internet for customers to find translators globally, and for translators to find customers globally. And there are many advantages for both parties. Customers are looking for lower costs and faster delivery. Translators are looking for the opposite. They're looking for greater profitability for the work they do. Now, both can be, with a bigger market and greater liquidity. Translators can be more selective about what work they take on. If you're in a very small market, like for example in New Zealand, if this was only a market, we would have to do all the jobs that offered in order to survive.
Sure.
All the unprofitable ones and the few small profitable ones. But in a global market, we can just go for the ones that our company is very good at doing. Like we're very specialized in medical devices. So rather than doing all this other rubbish that doesn't make us much profit, we can do less of that and take on more from a global market. So there are advantages in a bigger globalized market for both parties, both the buyer and for the provider. And so that's the sort of opportunity we're looking at.
That's you mentioned some interesting points there, because I see the same happening in the teaching tutoring business that you have for the lower skills stuff, an application or also something basically also normal computer based, and then for the very specialized things or conversation you want to still take and a teacher and or talk with your tutor, and but as you said, the market is growing. What is your take? I see, besides from having such a platform where you have the global offer and also a global community of translators, I see startups now experimenting with instant translation. So basically a company or also an individual in some cases maybe comes in, posts the request, and somebody is available, and apparently they try to almost do a simultaneous translation. I imagine that very hard, because first you have to have the right person sitting at the other end, and then they have to be capable. And as you said, you are specialized in medical devices. It doesn't mean that you cannot translate legal documents, for example, but maybe you would say there may be a better person somewhere in the world.
Sure.
But how can a service do that?
I think the point here is, yes, I think some of those startups that are looking at instant translation, as you talk about, yes, I think they will be successful because there is a certain market for that. But the market is highly differentiated. It's very different from having I'd like 100 words at a very simple conversational level or a very simple subject, but it's very different if it's the user manual for some complex X-ray equipment and the repair manual, whatever, which will require a lot more research and more complex quality assurance steps involved, and it takes time. So, so those are quite different markets, completely different markets, and probably they will need different types of business platforms to support them. So a business platform that's a global one that's looking after complex technical manuals is probably not the same business that's doing instant translations. So these are different things.
And I also doubt a little bit that there is just this vast majority of people, and anybody is or was theoretically capable of doing a translation. I mean, you do particular studies, you need training, and it's not as if anybody could become an interpreter or a translator, of course.
No, not at all. So this is where, in the business we're thinking about, is that we are looking at a business model which we call multi-factor option. This is when you are in the negotiating to do a job, to take on a job, is that we have half a dozen standardized criteria for the other problem I should mention first is often, of course, the customer often doesn't understand how to make a sensible decision when buying a transaction. Very often the customer doesn't know the language, doesn't know what's really involved, and ends up using the only thing he can understand, and that's price. So you have an ISO 9001 certified company who has, or a European Translation Standard certified company who has put a lot of effort into developing their skills and their quality assurance procedures. But the customer looks at this company compared with somebody who is much less qualified, and the only thing he's got to make a decision on is the price, because he is very often unable to make any other decision. So what a multi-factor auction looks at a number of factors that the customer is confronted with, such as the price, obviously, which is negotiable, the delivery date, which is negotiable, the subject expertise, if it can be independently verified. If you have a PhD in engineering, or you have a translator in your company who has a qualification, that's something you can leverage. In fact, a customer, if he realizes the value of it, may be prepared to pay more for that if he understands that it's important.
Yeah, because maybe he understands that then the translation could be done more quickly.
Sure. So the customers have different needs, and the same customer may have different needs at different times. Sometimes a customer wants wants high quality, gone through strict QA, some sort of strict QA process, so he has low probability of error, but he might be in a hurry. All right, in which case he will be expecting to pay more. But on another day, it may not be such an important document, and he may not be in a hurry. And he may not need a PhD, translator with a PhD in engineering. So he has a greater expectation of a lower price. So translators, then depending on what the client's needs are, the translators have a better mechanism for negotiating with the client on a number of known and understood variables.
And you, with your platform idea, you basically want to make this whole idea how it comes to a contract more transparent, is that you basically want to put this in sort of a form or mask on the internet that the client can already select, and then the different translators could make their offer and answer. Right. So similar maybe to something like 99 Designs, where the customer can also describe their project, and then you have different people answering and coming with their proposals.
Sure. So it should be in real time, live, that the customer can upload his documents, the translation companies can inspect them and decide what sort of price. They get to understand what the client's requirements are in some detail. Then comes the negotiating, and if I were a company, I might decide this client wants medium quality. He appears to be in a hurry, and we have the right expertise. And I might see that I can see also what my competitors are offering. Now, I might discover that, in fact, before I start quoting, that somebody meets his requirements better than I can, and that I would, to win the contract, I would have to offer a lower price. I might decide I won't even compete on this one. I will look for jobs where I can be assured that that the job is going to be profitable, and that I may be able to compete. If I can see that if I know that my customer, I suspect my customer is looking for a 5-star job, and I'm a 5-star company, but a 3-star company puts in a price for $1,000, for example, I might want to put my price in for $1,200 because I will bet my bid might be high because I might figure that what I can offer will in fact be better than the lower priced one. So it gives the customer the opportunity to actually to mix and match different factors to get the best possible match with his needs, whether it's faster or slower, sooner or later, higher price, lower price, quality, subject expertise, all those sort of factors. And of course those sort of factors can go up and down, and so it's a nice, I like the idea very much of translation companies. I'm sure they will like the idea too, of an auction process where they feel sometimes they can push the price up and win.
Yeah, that it's not only competition over lower price. Yeah, I understand.
No, because the sales are not always made on price alone.
Yeah.
They are only made on price alone when the buyer is ignorant and doesn't know how to evaluate what he's being offered.
Sure.
So that's what we're hoping.
Great. So Paul, we have of course to mention, it came through a little bit during our interview, but that was also how we first got in touch. You're very active on Twitter, and the people interested in following you should tweet at what?
Should tweet my Twitter name.
Yeah,
yes.
which is
Paul Edgar 1.
Exactly. And I suppose this is then also your company?
No. Paul Edgar 1 is my first and middle names. I just invented this name in 2009 when I first went to Twitter. In 2009, I think I tweeted once, and then I couldn't see the point of Twitter, and I lost interest after one tweet, and then several years later, somebody sent me a message via Twitter, came to my email, and I went to have a look, and suddenly
you got it.
All worked. Suddenly occurred to me, and I very quickly became an addict.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean you're very active, and what else should we mention? I find very insightful and interesting, of course, your blog on language or second language acquisition, translation. I think anybody interested in language learning, language and internet, of course, should read that. Let's put the address of the blog as well.
Fine. The blog is www.translationbiz, as one word, translationbiz.wordpress.com.
Okay. Perfect. So then are you on other social media platforms, maybe with your translation company, on Facebook or anything else? Would you like to mention anything else?
I have got a Facebook account. I have got a Facebook, but it's mainly for my looking at photographs of my grandchildren and my children. And
so that's more personal. Yeah.
Yeah, it's become more personal. At the moment, I'm still in the throes of being a totally committed Twitter person. I haven't got time for anything else right now.
Oh, and I would say Twitter can take away a good part of your work day. Of your day. Yeah. Okay. Great. So we have Twitter, we have the blog, translationbiz.wordpress.com. That's great. And well, Paul, continued success with the existing company, of course, and then all the best for the development of the new project, and you should keep me updated when there are more things to show and to talk about the new project.